Hello everyone, this is Joshua Phillips for the Ohio Valley Chess Club. Trying something new today while a dog barks in the background. I'm going to try some chess tactics puzzles here on lichess.org. And what I'm going to do is I'm on their puzzle trainer. I have just the board showing. I'm going to talk through my thought process and then make the move I think is correct. And then, if I'm doing a good job, I will tell you that I actually made the correct move and keep thinking through it. And if I've made the incorrect job, Lichess will verbally abuse me a little bit. So let's jump into it. Here's our first puzzle position that popped up today. So the first thing I'm looking at is, are there any really obvious, simple checkmates on the king? So queen takes rook. I don't see a follow-up to. It shows, by the way, the last move that was made, these yellow squares indicate that the king moved like this, from the E1 square to the F1 square. So I'm looking at, it seems like queen takes rook, it just goes queen takes rook, white takes the queen back, and I do not see a follow-up initially. One thought is, queen takes the pawn on d3, while the bishop takes back. It does look menacing. And another thing I noticed is that, we're to some extent looking for some kind of benefit from pressure. So I'm considering that if I move bishop to g4, this threatens the white queen. And if the white queen runs away, so I don't quite see anything there yet. So I don't see an immediate way to threaten the queen profitably. So we could think about bishop to e6, trying to get white's bishop off of c4, because if we imagine bishop takes, we then have queen takes d3 with check. However my opponent blocks, we take the bishop back, and we will have won a pawn. I'm not sure that's good enough. And then we have to consider whether white might do something other than take my bishop. I'm not sure there is a good alternative. So right now, that's my current candidate, is I think that wins a pawn. And of course, if white were to interpose with the knight, we have just bishop takes knight, and then if bishop takes back, we take the pawn, we're just up a piece. So that all seems fine. If we were to move bishop e6 and white were to play knight to e2, trying to kick my queen, I don't see... Oh, I see. I would have queen takes b2. I don't know for certain whether I can actually run out of that corner if I get my queen in there. Okay, and here's an additional idea. If I were to move knight to g4, that threatens checkmate. That would threaten checkmate. So if we imagine the knight to g4 again, then white must do something to make that not checkmate. So we would have bishop to e3, in which case I believe I can just safely take the bishop with my queen. We would have queen to e1, and okay, I'm not sure how I would follow up that yet. We would also have queen to e2 and queen to f3. Okay. So I still haven't found any clear-cut tactical idea that I like. We also have the idea of knight to e4, threatening mate in a similar way, but that doesn't seem to work at all. I'm not sure how I defend some of white's defenses to knight to g4. So play knight to g4, and white moves the queen onto the e file, and then I would move my rook to the e file. Actually, I would get checkmated that way, so that's quite bad. Okay. We'd also have the idea of knight capturing h2 with check. So how does that handle? Okay, so let's say knight to g4. If white plays queen, let's just first look at queen to e1. We would have knight takes h2, check. The king gets pushed onto the e file. And then we would have, so if the king's in front of the queen, we would have rook check. If the king is behind the queen, we would have bishop to g4. I think this works. So I've thought about this for a while, about 6 minutes. I now believe I've calculated enough, and this will be mate. So or some kind of serious material win. Okay, Lichess has said best move, keep going. It is the computer replies with queen, captures knight on g4, and I take back with my bishop. So I am successful. Now I'm not sure it might be the best defense by the engine. What I was thinking of is so I made the knight move. What I was concerned about was how we would attack. Let's look at just queen to f. I'm sorry, queen to f. Wow, f3 is obviously awful because it forks the queen. If queen to e2, we have a mate in. The computer saying it's a mate in 3 after knight takes. There's only one legal response. Oh, I see. I hadn't quite found this yet. But I felt that my position was probably good enough. See, I was looking at bishop threaten, which is actually a losing move. So I got a bit lucky here in that I had thought this bishop move was dangerous enough. But it is not. So I did get a bit lucky. So we have, and just saying, this wins after takes rook. You're obliged to put the queen in the way, and then what's it saying here? It's saying queen takes is mate. Okay. So that was one puzzle. Got a bit lucky, though. I found a lot of the relevant ideas. So let's just jump to our next puzzle here. Okay, so white made the move rook to b7. My first guess would be we are looking for potentially a checkmate in the middle of the board, actually. That would be the first thing that springs to mind. So, if we go on that premise, let's do this a little bit more systematically, perhaps. Is white simply hanging any pieces? No, we have no way to take either rook or either knight. Rook captures the pawn on d4. I would have king takes back, so that doesn't seem like it has any chance. And I don't see a weird way to exploit rook takes knight on f6. So again, I'm kind of looking to see if I can find a checkmating idea or some kind of skewering attack on the king and one of the rooks. First move that jumps to mind is the idea of rook to f5 because it checks the king. You should generally always look at your checks. The king would only be able to move to the square e4 in response. So the king would be so I were to play rook to f5 check. The only legal move for white is king to e4. Okay. I would then I simply don't see a follow up from that position though, unfortunately. Okay. So if we imagine rook to f5. King to e4. If we then played bishop check, bishop to d5 check, attacking the rook, white would be required to take back with the knight or lose material. I would then take with my rook, and at that point we would have an even endgame. So I don't quite see a win there. Okay. Couldn't quite find anything there. What to look at next? Well, I think I should keep looking at this a little bit longer. I don't know if I'm supposed to see that endgame as potentially winning, because I would have a rook on... I would have rooks on d8 and d5. So I would have an attack against the d4 pawn with check, but black has the opportunity to take my a pawn. I don't see how I'm meant to win from that position. Okay, so let's look at some other thoughts. So the next thing that springs to mind is maybe we have rook to a8 supporting the a pawn, threatening to march it up the board, and trying to create some kind of opportunity from there. So if we say rook to a8, white has some blocking, a lot of different options. I don't really see what to do from there. Oh, actually, let's see. If I play rook takes the knight on f6, so rook takes knight, I was starting to notice that there's this idea of rook to e8 threatening the king and the rook. So let's see. If we were to play rook takes f6, if white were to take back with the pawn... No, that doesn't seem to work. I don't have time to get back. If you have simply pawn takes. Check. Back the king up. And I don't see how I win from that position. So it's obviously quite likely I'm going to fail here. The best thing I've been able to find is the rook f5 check so far. And let's see, are there any other interesting ideas? So I'm going to try the rook f5 move. Maybe I'll notice something along the chain if it's correct. I think I'm going to fail this puzzle. So check, saying best move. Is there some follow-up? So, we do bishop follow-up. Oh! So if we have bishop to d5 check, if knight takes, I also have the option of rook to e8. I don't see that as having any additional value, however. I think the calculation here must simply be that that's a winning endgame if I'm correct. So let's try the move. No, it's saying puzzle failed on the bishop move. Okay. I'm going to hit view solution. Now it likes rook takes knight. Now the computer likes rook takes knight. I think it's obvious enough why we want pawn takes rook. And then what is the... Ah, okay. I would at that point have bishop check, forking the king and the rook. The king runs, doesn't really matter where, I don't think. And then bishop takes, and black is clearly winning. So let's look at that from the beginning again. Uh-oh. Now let me back up the entire game. Okay. We started in this position after the rook takes. So the correct idea was to notice that we can compel the... By making this rook check, we can compel the black king up to e4, and then with the bishop check, we are compelling knight takes. I'm sorry. Then after the king is moved, with rook takes knight, white is obliged to take back. So white has to go backwards, and at this point, it seems to not actually find that move very quickly. We have rook takes. And notice that none of the other moves have any sort of relevance. That, if I get to just run my rook back, if the rook is not taken, the rook runs away. Black is up a bishop, so there's a pretty clear advantage there, even if I'm not good enough to describe how it's definitely winning. But then after pawn takes, we have this bishop check forking two pieces. Okay, engine slightly preferring f4. And now we have a very similar advantage, except that black has reduced the material a little bit more. See, my recording is saying 20 minutes. That's definitely enough of me talking for one little video. So thank you very much, everyone, for watching. I really appreciate feedback on whether you think me solving puzzles is worthwhile content. Thank you very much for watching, and have a nice day.